We are here on Eastern Shoshone, Umatilla, Crow, and Cheyenne ancestral land at the home of Kris Hampton in Lander, Wyoming. Kris, you are a dad to 2 and a granddad to 1.
Yeah, in a funny order.
You've been climbing for close to 3 decades in nearly every style. And after breaking 514 just after turning 40 and into V10 at 41, you are now a climbing coach and the founder of the Power Company, as well as a well-known host of multiple climbing podcasts. Thank you so much for having us today.
Yeah, of course. Anytime I get to have a conversation, it's a good thing.
Everyone says it gets easier, right? You have a newborn, oh, it gets easier. You have a toddler, oh, it gets easier. You have a middle school age kid, it gets easier. Then you have a teenager. You have a mid-20-something, 25-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter. In your experience, does it actually get easier?
Yes, I'll say yes. In both scenarios, I think yes. When they're 2, it's their job to manipulate you. You know, like that's how they survive, is to figure out the best way to manipulate you into doing what they need.
Is that what's going on?
I think so.
Okay.
And then once you can have conversations with them and reason with them and, you know, there's more understanding, I think it does get easier.
Does it get more fun? It
gets more fun, I think. And that's a personal thing because...
I know. I'm like, what is easy to you, right? What is easier?
Like you get to be really silly with this, 2-year-old, and that's really fun and really freeing in a lot of ways. And then as they get older and cooler, you can't be as silly, or maybe you can, and it's just up to them to figure that out with their friends. But
there's something a little heartbreaking about that, actually. Like my thought of like not being able to just be the like heroic goofball, right?
Yeah. Well, I think you still can, and I think that has to just be part of the equation all the time. My daughter never asked me to not be me. In fact, I think she thought it was cool a lot of the times that I was good at roller skating. Like we would do roller skating birthday parties, and I worked in a skating rink as a teenager. So when I was good at roller skating, she thought it was cool, instead of just being like, God, Dad, I wish you'd quit showing off,
It sounds like you have a good relationship.
We do. So I think it does get easier. I think it gets easier. I think it gets better as long as you're embracing change and the unknown, because you're not going to know what this little person's going to become,
I mean, I say my little guy is a different person like every month.
Totally is. Yeah. And that's going to keep changing and changing dramatically. They're going to become whoever they want to become. So as long as you're accepting of that, I do think it gets more and more fun just to see what they're becoming.
Okay, honest talk. Parenting in your 20s versus your 40s sounds like the setup is very different.
Yeah.
As far as physically on your body, have you noticed differences?
Much harder now, but I think I'm in pretty good shape for an almost 50-year-old, at least, from the generation I grew up in. 50 seemed like done, So I can still keep up with her, but I do suspect that by the time she's 10 and I'm almost 60, it's going to be a different story. And I'm definitely concerned about that. Whereas when I was in my 20s or, in my 30s with a 10-year-old, she couldn't keep up with me still,
You started climbing hard when you were older, honestly, as far as, the community like mantra really is.
Yeah.
You feel that you're still pushing yourself in your climbing as you approach 50?
In different ways. I'm not aiming for difficulty as much as I was, though I still feel like I can do that, but I am pushing myself still. I made a big goal to reach 100 513s before I turned 50. So I've been pushing pretty hard for that, and it's tiring. It's a lot more tiring than it was in my 30s, you know. But I think the coolest thing about climbing is that you can push yourself in all sorts of ways, whether it's with difficulty or volume or style or just the level of fun that you're having. Progression doesn't have to be about grades. It doesn't have to be about climbing harder things. And I think we forget that a lot, that we can keep progressing even if it's not, I climbed a harder thing.
I may have seen this from you actually, that even just making the goal of working on your footwork or like one part of the actual movement of climbing versus pushing grades.
Anything.
You know, and then seeing, shifting your lens so that the progress you're seeing is within the realm of whatever that goal is that you set.
Yeah.
I think climbing has been constructed with the quantification with numerical grading, and it's just so easy to like fall on that. But as a parent, the goals that I set for myself now are different. It really has more to do with the experience and just doing it and enjoying it and using it for that mental health tool that is so critical for me.
Yeah.
Have your goals changed, I guess, as a parent?
Absolutely. For me, the challenge is what's important. I just want to challenge myself in some way. And like you just said, it's a mental health thing. Like I need that challenge somehow. It maybe doesn't even have to come from climbing. Like I like making things. So, you know, my recent climbing history podcast, I wanted to make something different. So it's this narrated, sound designed, and scored podcast. And for me, that was part mental health. Like it's a lot of work, but it's a challenge. And I need that challenge. I also need it physically. And that's where climbing comes in. So if I can come up with a new goal, whether it's, you know, to climb something harder or to climb more moderately hard things or to go do some new style I haven't done, if I'm challenging myself physically, it's going to make me a better parent because I get to show up mentally.
I have really been struggling because in my 18 years of climbing, the most fun I've had and the most challenging times I've had with climbing have been training for big climbing trips. And now it's become a lot harder to rely on those climbing trips as part of my training. And I'm becoming unmotivated because I can't really set the same goals for myself that I had before. Do you have any advice for people who might be struggling with what I'm struggling with, which is like not having the expedition on the horizon?
Yeah, totally. I do think I've leaned into the making and the creative side of podcasting, partly as I'm going to be home more. Here's something I can do and not have to take a full day away, you know. I've also learned to do shorter missions and half days, and that's been really important. Try to find your identity in other things as well. You know, none of us are just one thing. We're not just a climber. We all have other parts of ourselves, and if we can learn to explore those and get the same kind of happiness out of those, not only are we being more present when we're being parents, but we're also setting this example for our kids of, oh, I can be me and find me in all of these other things, you know, and giving them the idea that, oh, I can be whoever I want.
The community almost has a tension. There's kind of a push-pull with embracing everyone who loves climbing and just climbing, but then also like, no, like actually you have to be climbing at a certain level to really like be a climber.
Yeah.
And that makes it really hard to say like, oh, I'm still going to identify as a climber, but you know, I'm not doing all these things that the latter group kind of imposes on the definition.
One of my favorite things to do in the entire world is just to interrogate the way we do things as communities, as people, especially if I hear someone say, well, this is how it's always been done. I'm like, let's tear that down. Let's tear it apart. Let's find out why. Let's see, are we doing it the best way? Maybe we're not. And I've really tried to step back from that because I used to be that completely. I was like this traditionalist, you know, back in the day. and offwits were like the holy grail. And now I'm like, why would anyone climb those things? and I'm clipping bolts all the time. And I'm going to top rope highball boulders. I don't care, you know?
Mhm.
And it's the same with who is a climber and how do you identify as a climber? Who am I to say who a climber is? Who am I to say that the new generation doesn't have it right when it comes to ethics, you know? I'm a firm believer that if your mantra, if your beliefs, if your ethics stay the same decade to decade to decade, then you're just being stagnant.
Mm.
You're not changing. You're not watching what's changing. You're not accepting what's changing. So I think those things should change. I think it's healthy to change. It's why we all love all of this to begin with. You know, we act like we want to embrace change. We love change. We love this new thing, and then we don't want anything to change after we've decided we love it. You know, it has to change.
Now, I've interviewed a couple women about their experience with labor and delivery. As an athlete, can you tell us a little bit about your experience witnessing labor and delivery?
Oh man, I'm a like as a coach, I'm a like super observer. I love to really watch and understand what people are doing and when we were in the hospital room, I was like trying to learn what all the monitors were doing and trying to understand the monitors. And then she held off from the epidural for as long as she could, and then she wanted the epidural. But as soon as they gave it to her, the monitors changed pretty dramatically. And I saw the nurses get nervous, and it freaked me out.
Did the heart rate drop?
The baby did not like the epidural and went back inside further. And it was this like really scary situation where they called the doctor back in and they were like, well, we were planning on having a vaginal birth and ended up C-section because of the complications after the epidural. Really scary for me sitting there watching, and I can't imagine what my wife was going through, having to, you know, being the person who's keeping this baby alive. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
There was a moment in my 5-day long laboring
Wow,
process.
really?
Well, I had to be induced,
Yeah.
and it took a really long time. So I was in the hospital
5
for a long
days.
time. I was actively laboring for more than 24 hours, but it took a really long time to get into labor. And eventually I got an epidural. But there was a moment a while after the epidural where the baby's heart rate dropped. And, you know, it's funny. I think it was worse for my partner because the nurses ran into the room. He actually works in a hospital too, though. So maybe he knew a little more what was going on than I did.
Yeah.
But I looked at his face, and that was when I got scared because his face said that he was going to lose me and the baby. And it was like, oh my God, you know, it was like they actually gave me medication to stop labor. And then they had to use Pitocin to kind of re-induce me again.
Yeah. I'm curious, leading into that, how old were you when?
35.
Okay, and I think my wife was 30. She was 35 when she got pregnant and 36 when she had the baby. And the doctors very much treated her like, I mean, I know the term geriatric pregnancy isn't used anymore,
I think they still use
but
it.
it still gets used,
Yeah.
you know? And they kept calling it a high-risk pregnancy. And, you know, they're not taking into account that you're fit women who are, you know, physically active, but it's almost this scare tactic the whole time you're pregnant to like, that's basically leading you up to something could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So then the first thing that does go wrong is doubly scary because you've been fed all of this, you might be too old to have a baby talk.
I think I definitely still have unexplored PTSD from labor and delivery. I think like I buried it more than I did even a year ago when I first started these conversations.
Yeah. As a mom now, when you do go climbing, is it mentally different for you?
That's a great question. So I actually have lost some of my performance anxiety since becoming a parent.
Really?
And I think it's because the stakes are just so different. I never really even wanted to get off the ground bouldering in the gym before. And
Mm,
now I like am enjoying bouldering. Like I don't have the same anxiety.
that's
It
interesting.
is. It's so interesting because it's the opposite of what I would have thought, but I don't know how I'm going to feel about risk. When I think about it, I definitely feel differently. That's part of the grief I have about climbing,
Mm,
honestly, because I miss that type of climbing.
yeah.
Not that the risk of it really, but just the environment and the remoteness of some of the routes that I've done.
It's an interesting thing to be thinking about while engaging in a sport like climbing. Just the other day I was cleaning this route and it started hailing and the winds were every time I unclipped a draw as I was jugging out, the wind would blow me totally horizontal. And it's this sharp limestone and it was terrifying. And it would have been scary when I was in my 20s and 30s, but not to the same degree. Like not to the oh, this could be it kind of thought that's going through my head, never would have gone through my head in my 30s. At least I don't think so.
When you talk about a shifting perception of mortality, can you talk a little more about that? Are
You know,
are you accepting it more at all?
I don't know that I don't accept it, or it's not that I'm afraid of it necessarily. It's just that I'm recognizing it's coming closer. But I also now have this young person and I know the type of relationship I have with my older daughter right now. And it's very concerning to me that I'm not going to have that same kind of
Mm,
relationship with Harper as she gets older. It won't be the same kind of relationship, even if I do make it to that age.
mhm,
And that concerns me
mm.
more than anything.
And so many of us don't have that experience, so we don't have that wisdom.
Yeah. Maybe that's a blessing to not
Yeah,
have that
because
experience.
I mean, so
Um,
much of parenting is bittersweet. You've talked about this a little bit. Do you have strengths as a parent because of your climbing?
yeah, I think so. I'm a patient parent and I'm a let you learn for yourself kind of a parent. I'm going to let you fail. I'm going to let you continue puzzling it out. I'm not going to give you the answer. And I think that both of those things have come to me through climbing. And I'm also, and my oldest daughter will tell you this. This would be one of the first things she told you if you were talking to her, is that I don't let kids win just to let them win. Like if we're playing a game and I can beat you, I'm going to beat you. I don't want to steal that struggle. That struggle's so important. I
That's how
want
we
you to
learn.
have it.
That's when we learn, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You coach parents.
Yep.
Have you noticed similar training issues between moms and dads? Do you see any kind of trends, I guess, in training parents?
I'll say this. I think the population I get to see is going to skew toward the side of overmotivated, that they've hired a coach already. So they're already one of the more motivated people, I think. I think the training part is easier for a lot of people because it can be done in little bits. They can do it at home, they can do it in the gym, they can do it on the road, wherever they can sort of fit it in. But performance, you have to go be there, you have to show up in front of the thing. You have to, now is your time. You have to do it. I think that's the toughest thing for a lot of the parents I coach is to be able to perform when they have the free time to do it and to not be distracted, to perform your best. You can't be distracted. And that's a hard thing for a parent, especially a new parent. So I think it's less training, more performance. I think
Mm.
that's the hard part.
Partners. I'm seeking climbers who understand that I only have this one moment to perform.
Yeah.
And then the flip side of this is I may not show up for climbing plans because my toddler is sick.
First off, I think this is tied into our identity as well, at least to mine. I am the good partner. Like I am the person who doesn't bail. I am the person who makes sure you get to get on your thing and I get to get on my thing. Like I'm selfish about my time and I'm selfish about yours. Like I'm going to make sure you get to do what our goal is, you know? And this has totally flipped that on its head. Things had to get shifted around. I had to cancel constantly on partners. And I think that was probably the hardest piece of it for me, was having to cancel, because it's so hard to find a good partner to begin with. And then to have to 3 weeks in a row say, I'm canceling again. Sorry, you know, hope you have someone else you can climb with. That sucks. And I'm the kind of partner where if you bail on me for no good reason, that was your last, you don't get another chance.
That is generally, that's the culture.
And now I'm that person who's bailing, you know? So I think it does come down to communication. You have to, first off, I think not making it just a twosome is really important. So I stopped trying to just schedule days with one person, because I don't want to bail and have you end up being partnerless, you know, and have no one to go climb with. It's a challenge, but I think it's one of those things that as a climber, you have to do. You have to open yourself up to, I'm going to have to be a different type of partner than I used to be. I'm going to have to let my potential partners know this ahead of time and not spring it on them. I do think, however, that I think by being a really good partner, I've gained myself some karma.
All right, going to pick your coaching brain a little bit.
Okay.
So let's say we have like an urban family,
Yep.
climber parents. They don't have a home wall, and maybe because of work and childcare issues, whatever, they actually like are not going to climb for like 1-2 years.
Okay.
What would you recommend for home training, like small either portable devices that they could have in their house, or even just body weight training to stay in, like, I'm not going to go out and injure myself if I go climb what used to be my warm up, you know, next weekend?
I think fingers are definitely priority number one if you're a rock climber. If you can keep your fingers strong and healthy, you're halfway there already. Any kind of just general body strength is going to be really important. Because I'm coaching, I'm in coaching mode now, you're asking about the physical training, but I'm going to tell you it may not be the most important part. You know, you might just have to reconfigure your relationship with climbing for now. And that's going to be important for you, not going out with the same expectations. If you started climbing because it was fun, remember that. If you started climbing because you like to be physically challenged, remember that. It might not be the same grade that's physically challenging you anymore, but you can still go find a physical challenge. You can still go find fun. You can still go have great views from the top. You can go to great places still.
Do you have any parenting tips or tricks for your 2-year-old?
Let them dictate a lot more than you think they should. Like we tend to think we have all the answers. And especially when it comes to a toddler, I don't think that's so true. I think they're exploring at this pace that we can't understand anymore, you know? And we have to let them explore. We have to let them make mistakes. We have to let them struggle. We're not as right as we think we are. I think that's probably my best parenting tip is you're not as right as you think you are. Maybe let them dictate the things now and then.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You have so many insights into all of these topics that are so central to climbing and impact parents. I think, you know, this resource and the wisdom you've shared is going to really benefit families that are breaking into trying to balance work, climbing, and family. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope it does help somebody. Just maybe don't do it in the weird backwards way that I've done it. Or maybe do.